Hello, boys and girls. Today I'd like to go over the assignment that we signed yesterday with the Dreamcatcher and kind of give you some examples. I saw that some of you guys were coming back. If you accidentally turn it in and it's blank, you need to let Mrs. Hall know that. And then she can message me and let me send it back to you because she won't be able to, but I can send it back to you. A couple of you, I did do that. I think you accidentally turned in the turn in button too soon. Also, I am sending it back. If you get it back without a grade, it means it wasn't to the quality that we need it yet for. So that means that we need to try again. And even those who do have a grade, I want you to look back at my comments. There should not be any misspellings on this paper, guys. We've got a spell check in your Google Doc. If it's underlined red, it's not correct. You need to fix it before you turn it in to me. Also, if it's underlined blue, that means there's a grammatical error, and you need to touch that with your 2 fingers on your screen, and you need to fix that. Or you can touch it on your touch screen, and you need to fix it that way. Complete sentences are expected for third graders. You must restate if there's a question. So sometimes, and you must explain. If it says you need to show something from the text or proof from the text, or there was an example that showed proof from the text, that is what is expected. And you need to do that also in order to have your assignment done. So with that said, all of you will have this assignment turned back into you when you're seeing this video, and I'm going to do it with you in front of you on the screen, and I want you to follow along, and I want you to fix your papers. So at this point, I want you to all open up this document. You can see my comments, you can see my examples or what I'm asking for, but at this point also, I want you to watch this video, have your paper in front of you just like the one I'm showing right now, and we're going to redo this together. So part of this is just the learning process. Normally it takes about 2 days when I first assign something like this to third graders anyway. So if you're getting it sent back, don't feel bad about that. This is just part of us learning, but it also means that these are the expectations and the standards that we need to do. And in order for you to be successful, you need to learn how to do it this way. So I'm going to help you, and this is going to be what we would call a reteach day. A reteach day is when you're on the right track, you're learning, you're growing, but we still have a little more growth to do in order to make it third grade quality work. So that's what we're going to do today. We're going to make it third grade quality work. All right, so we're going to look at this assignment, and we're going to do it step by step together. All right, so restate the question and answer it in a complete sentence. That is a third grade standard. That is something you need to do. Fill in the text evidence sentence that supports your answer. That's what a lot of you forgot. You might say they feel happy, but you didn't tell me why they feel happy, or you didn't prove it from the text. That has to be done. That is the expectation. You may use both the story and the pages right after to help you. This assignment goes with the skills page and the story. That's the other thing, guys. If I have a skills page that you need to follow, you need to write the words that are on that skills page. So make sure you have your books open to 45. You have to have and utilize your book for this assignment. All right, so the first question is an example, and you need to definitely make sure you follow this example, because this example is what I expect for number 40. So Mrs. Klingler has how many sentences in this example? We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 sentences that answers question number 1. I had some of you that just had one, like a fragment, not even a full complete sentence here. So that is the first change that we need to do. Third graders write in complete thoughts and with complete sentences. And if it's asking for proof from the text, we have to prove from the text. That's just part of what we have to do for this assignment. So when it asked you, how did Peter feel at the beginning of the story, use details from the first paragraph on page 39. The example says, and this example is on your book also on page 44. So even in your book, it shows this example of this level of writing. I can visualize how Peter feels at the beginning of the story. He walked home, salty tears ran down his cheeks, his stomach hurt. These details from page 39 helped me figure out that Peter feels sad and upset. So they didn't even give the feeling until the end. First, it talked about how they visualized. It talked about how they went back into the story. It gave examples of what they see, and then they finally answered the question that Peter felt sad and upset. Okay, so if it's asking again, how does he feel when he first has the dream catcher? Reread page 40 and visualize what happened and then answer it. They want you to write the visualization down. It's not just visualize in your head. You need to explain it on the paper. So let's do that together, okay? So all of you, I want you to have this paper open. Mrs. Klingler is going to do it, and I would like for you to take the time and do this in yours also, because this is how we do good answers in third grade. All right, so how did Peter feel when he first saw the dream catcher? Reread page 40, visualize what happened, and then answer the question. Well, the only way I can do this is if I go back and reread page 40. So if I'm over here on my pages and I'm looking in my textbook, now you can have your book in front of you. Mrs. Klingler is just going to use the online book so that you can see what part I'm looking at on the screen. But for you guys, open up your book and go to page 40. You cannot answer these questions without going back into the proper pages. Okay, so I need to figure out how does he feel on page 40, and I need to find proof from the text that shows how he feels, because I have to talk about that first before I tell about how he feels. And I need to talk about how I can visualize that in my head, because that's what the expectation is. All right, so let's reread page 40. Page 40 is right here. So we don't have to worry about page 41. We only need to worry about right here on page 40. And it says, Peter followed Nokomis. She went to a closet and stretched to reach to the top shelf. She pulled out a small box and blew away the dust. She handed it to Peter. Open it, she said. Peter opened the box. He spotted a wooden hoop inside. It was the shape of a circle. String was woven and twisted around the hoop. It looked like a spider web. A black bead sat near its center. Feathers hung from the bottom. Peter wiped away his tears and smiled. Okay, so there are clear part on this that talks about how he feels. Okay, so when I look at this, the fact that Peter wiped away his tears and smiled because she finds something that he can use, or at least an idea. Because remember, on the page before this, on they were, let's go back to page 39. The page before this, she's asking him what's wrong, and he looks up and he's worried about giving a presentation. And can you remind me of customs and beliefs and a family tradition? So he is happy because that's what Nokomis did for him. She was able to find him something that he can use, or at least teach him about his family tradition. So let's go back to page 40. So here it says, Peter opened the box. He spotted the wooden hoop inside. So he's learning about his family tradition. He's wiping away his tears, okay? Because that's what he was sad about. He was sad that he didn't know what to talk about. So when we're coming back over to our assignment, I need you to look at the example, because the example is how you need to start number 2. They give you an example for a reason. Good readers and good writers follow the examples of other good readers and good writers. That's how you perfect your skill at reading. It's how you perfect your skill at writing. So actually, one of the famous quotes from Benjamin Franklin is like, he states how he learned how to become a better writer by reading other good writers and modeling his writing like them. Okay, so if it worked for Benjamin Franklin and it's worked for other people, we need to follow that same skill and learn from our examples. Our examples tell you how to build it, what is expected, and how to model. Okay, so here the example is, I can visualize how Peter feels at the beginning of the story. Here we're going to change it to, I can visualize how Peter feels when he first saw his dream catcher. And that's our first sentence. So we're going to do that. I can visualize how Peter feels when he first saw the dream catcher. Okay, so when he first saw, let's see. Okay, so we're going to change saw to sees because that part there showed me grammatically that sees would be better there. So we're going to go ahead and take the grammar note. That's the other thing. We should not be having misspellings or grammar mistakes when your document shows you how to fix that, because one of the technology skills that are for third graders is that I know how to use technology to help me when I'm writing. And if that's the case, then you're going to have to pay attention to those blue and red underlinings, and you're going to have to see what is the best answer. There should be no excuse for a misspelling word when you have a spell check in your paper or the book in front of you. All right, so I can visualize how Peter feels when he first sees the dream catcher. Okay, that's what they did. They talked about what they were visualizing when in the beginning of the story. Now, the next thing they talked about is the things that he did. All right, he walked home, salty tears ran down his cheek, his stomach hurt. Those are the things that are helping us figure out how he felt then. He felt sad and upset. Now we need to go back to our story to figure out how does he feel now, and we need to give those examples because good writers follow good writing. We learn from them so that we can become better. All right, so and you have an example. If there's an example, there is no excuse for not being able to follow it. All right, so we're going to come back over here. We're going to put our cursor there. Mrs. Klingler is going to have it right there. Let's go back to page 40 and find the part that talks about how he is feeling there. All right, so Peter opened the box. He spotted the wooden hoop inside. It was the shape of a circle. String was woven and twisted around the hoop. It looked like a spider web. A black bead sat near the center. Feathers hung from the bottom. Peter wiped away his tears and smiled. Does that not show feeling, right? He's wiping away his tears. He's starting to smile. We can determine that he's starting to feel better, okay? He's starting to feel like, before he was nervous and upset about the presentation, he's starting to not feel nervous and upset about his presentation anymore. So we need to talk about that. But first, we have to talk about the clues from the text that show us that. So it says, Peter wiped away his tears and smiled. So we need to come back to the dream catcher and say, we can say in the story, it says that Peter wiped away his tears and smiled. Okay, now we're just proving from the text, and that's like this part. He walked home, salty tears ran down his cheek, his stomach hurt. These details let us know that Peter feels sad. Now we're going to follow up. It talks about here. It says, these details, page 45, helped me figure out that Peter feels sad and upset. We're going to model that same kind of sentence. But instead of page 39, we're going to say page 40, and we're going to say how Peter feels now. So we're doing this in 3 sentences, okay? First, we're going to say what they want us to say, kind of restating what we need to talk about. We're going to give the proof, and then we're going to give our answer. Okay, so we gave, I can visualize how Peter feels when he first sees the dream catcher. In the story, it says Peter wiped away his tears and smiled. These details use the same beginning words. These are called transition phrases or transition words. If you see transition words or transition phrases in a example, you may use those same transition words to help guide and construct your own answer so that it has everything that it needs. So these details from page, but now we're not doing page 39, now we're doing page 40. So from page 40 help me to figure out that Peter is starting to feel better about his presentation. Okay, he's starting to feel better about his presentation. He might even start to feel a little bit happy now, right? But he's definitely starting to feel better. So this is how you would construct the question for number 2. So if you just said Peter feels happy, that is not a complete answer, okay? And it would not get you full points. So I need this kind of an answer for these kinds of questions, okay? You need to talk about how you're visualizing it because that's the skill, okay? Look in your book, it gives you clues. The skill is visualization. You need to talk about visualizing in your answer. Okay, so if it has a skill here, you need to talk about that. All right, it also tells you what page you need to find your answer. And just like the example is showed you those proof, you also have to have the proof in your answer. And then you got to talk about where you found that proof. So page 40 is where they told us to look. So we better be talking about page 40 if that's what we're supposed to be on. And then on just like page 39 was. So this is the proper kind of answer that we would do for number 2. Okay, so now let's go forward. All right. Up here it says sequence. Use page 45 to help you. A character's actions make up the plot or an event in a story. Plot events are told in the order they happen. A plot always has a beginning, a middle, and end. Use page 45 to help you with the next part. Most of you did pretty good on this part. When you are filling out a chart, parts of this can just be answers, okay? So if it says, what are the characters? Here, the characters are Peter and his grandmother, Nokomis. So we would write Peter and Nokomis. Okay, Peter and Nokomis are our characters. That's all you need to have there. If you have Peter and his grandmother, that would work too, because Nokomis is his grandmother. He just calls her Nokomis. That's the grandmother name for the Ojibwe culture or Native Americans. The next part is the setting. All right, guys, on this one, I showed you how on page 45 it helps you build this. So you had part of the answers on page 45. All right, so you need to actually open up to page 45 and use that to help you. I can tell the ones who did and who did not. If you did it, then 1, you had this word spelled correctly, and 2, you had written what was in your book because you were following your book. So come back over here. You're going to touch setting. Okay. We can go ahead. If you want to ever center it like it was here, you could do it centered here also, but you don't have to have it centered, but this is the button you would push to center it, or it could be left aligned. So since I centered the main characters, I'm going to probably center this, and it just moves that cursor to the middle there. So it says a setting, so that would be, it's Nokomis's house. So Nokomis's house is where it's at. Some of you said Peter's home, but he's definitely going home to Grandma, and it would be Grandma's house. So we want to make sure that we give the proper house to who has it. So it's Nokomis's house. Okay. And that's where most of the setting is. It does talk about school, but it's not happening at school. So the setting is always where it's happening at. And the clues for that always is the fact that you can tell he's in the bedroom of the house here. You can tell on the story that he's beginning and he's starting. He has his backpack on, but he is definitely coming to the house. So if you're not ever sure on a setting in a story, look at the pictures in the story. The pictures will, especially in a picture book, will help you. As you get to chapter books, then it has more of a descriptive part of the setting. But even in picture books, they'll describe the setting for you. All right, so the next part is the beginning. So this was the part that was already an example here, but I followed the book on page 45 on this. So it says Peter is crying. Nokomis asks him what's wrong, and he says he has to give a presentation at school. All right, and then it talks about the middle here. So here's where, if you just opened up to page 45 and had followed, the middle was that example there. And it says on that page, it says, Nokomis shows Peter a dream catcher and they make one. That is the middle. That's what happened. She shows him about the dream catcher that was her childhood dream catcher, and then they made their own. So that's what we need to say there. So So that's the middle, okay? So, and part of this is he wanted to take her dream catcher to school, but he could not because it was so precious to her, because it was something that we definitely wouldn't want to get hurt or anything like that, because it was from her childhood. And to have something from your grandparents' childhood, there's not a lot of those around. A lot of time, grandparents don't always have toys or special things that were from their own childhood because it was so long ago. So we would definitely would consider that precious. That's very special and precious things shouldn't necessarily come to school. Those kinds of things should be taken at home, or like with Mrs. Klingler, I have my ring on, but it stays on me. I don't give that to other people, and I make sure I keep it safe. All right. So, and then the end. Now, this is the part that you needed to find out. Well, if you're going to find out the end, the best way to find out the end is to reread the end of the story. Even if you think you know that it's there, this is the part that truly was missing on the chart on page 45. The rest, you could have looked at page 45 and kind of said, oh, okay, this is what a middle is. Oh, okay, this is what they're talking about. And it was right there for you. All you had to do is use your book and put the answers in. But they left the end blank. They left that blank because they need you to think a little bit on your own and follow the examples here. So, setting, we just had to give an answer, just one answer. Peter, Nokomis for the main characters. But if you look at it, the beginning has a full complete sentence, couple sentences, 1, 2, 3 sentences. The middle has at least 2 sentences. So our end is going to need to have probably at least 2 sentences because that's the example that the book has given us. So the best way to find that in the book is to go back to your story and find the end of the story, and you're going to have to look at that. So Mrs. Klingler's, the end of the page story is on page 43. And so we're going to go back to page 43, and we need to learn about what happens at the end. Okay. So at first, Peter felt disappointed, and this is the middle of the story right here, because this is where the middle is showing. So we're going to find the middle, which they said that's where Nokomis and Peter makes the dream catcher. We know that's the middle. So that means we have to find that middle and look after that towards this area for us to find the end. So I always reread the middle and make sure I'm like, okay, where is the middle? This is where they said this part was the middle, and then I need to find the rest of the story after that. So it's just using your book to help you. So Nokomis and Peter worked together to make a dream catcher. That night, as he gazed and looked at the dream catcher over his bed, he made a plan. The next morning, he told Nokomis his plan. I'm going to show my class how to make a dream catcher, he said. That's a great idea, said Nokomis. Let's celebrate after your presentation. I will bake corn and cookies, and we will have a traditional Ojibwe party. Peter shared his dream catcher with the class and showed them how to make their own. Peter didn't feel nervous or scared at all. He felt pride in his culture and pride in himself, too. That's the end of the story, okay? So we should be talking about this part right here when we're talking about the end. So we should be sharing that Peter shared his dream catcher with his class, and he showed them how to make their own, and he felt pride in himself. Okay. So anytime you have a part of it where it has a vocabulary word in there, it is always good to utilize that vocabulary word, because you reinforce your learning of that word, making sure you understand what pride feels and is. Remember, pride means you're proud of yourself, and Peter is proud of himself. His feelings have changed. In the very beginning of the story, he was sad and upset because he didn't think he had a presentation and he didn't know anything about his culture. Then he talked to his grandma and she taught him about their traditions and their culture. And then he felt a little disappointed because he wanted to take that with him. But then he's happy again because Nokomis shows him. He can't take the thing that's precious, but Nokomis shows him how to do it. Once we come over here, he has a different feeling again. Now he feels pride. He feels pride because he did something and he completed it and he's proud of himself. So the things that we need to talk about at the end are Peter shared his dream catcher with his class. He then showed them how to make their own, and he felt pride in himself because he was able to fix the problem he had in the beginning of the story. In the beginning of the story, he didn't have a presentation. He's proud of himself. He feels pride because he was able to figure that out and was able to do it in a very good way. Okay, so those are the lessons that we are supposed to be learning from this. So let's go back to our story. Now, if you're doing this on the computer, it would be hard for you to go back and forth and look at the story. So at this point, when Mrs. Klingler has this paper up in front of me, I'm going to have the book in front of me because there is no reason for us to have mistakes on this when the book is right there. All right, so we got to talk about the end of the story. So it says here, we talked about how Peter shared his dream catcher with his class. So that's what we're going to say first. Peter shared his dream catcher with his class. Then the next thing it talked about is how he also showed them how to make their own. So he also showed them how to make their own dream catchers. And then the last thing it talked about is how he felt pride in doing that. He is proud of himself for accomplishing that, for fixing his problem, for doing what he needed to do. He's proud of that, and that's a good feeling. So we're going to say Peter felt pride in his culture. Which is actually straight from the book, okay? It says Peter felt pride in his culture. And that is very important because remember, in this story, our essential question, or the connection back to our essential question is, what tradition did Peter learn about and how did that help him? Your end should have that. Your end should definitely be talking about that because our essential question, our focus right now is the question here on page 38 was, what can traditions teach you about cultures? Read how Peter learns about his culture. So we need to always, if there's an end where we're supposed to learn something in a story, you need to always tie that back to that essential question because that is what the author felt was important for you to learn. And so we need to always, if we have the end of the story should have that lesson, should have that thing that the author wants you to learn in your answer. All right, because that means you understood the story. If you don't talk about that, then you're missing the point of what we were supposed to be learning. Okay, so let's go back up here and let's then look at our next part here. It says realistic fiction on page 46. The Dreamcatcher is realistic fiction. Realistic fiction is a made-up story that could really happen, has a beginning, a middle, and an end, and has illustrations and dialogue. So remember, illustrations are the pictures that are drawn, and dialogue is when you talk back and from between two people. All right, so it does have all of that. It is a made-up story, but it could really happen. We could, even though there really could be an Ojibwe family that is needing to do a class assignment about traditions or special presentations about their family. We do those kinds of things in school all the time. We ask kiddos to share about their family, or sometimes recipes or things like that. So that kind of assignment could definitely be real. You could actually, I mean, dream catchers are real things. That is a part truly about their culture. They really did believe in that, and they really did hang dream catchers up to catch those dreams. Those part of the story is real. So, and you really could have a grandmother that goes and helps you learn about your family. That part is real. It does have a beginning, a middle, and an end. So, that part definitely falls into realistic fiction. It has a beginning, a middle, and an end. It follows that plot outline where you learn about the characters, the setting, you have different actions, and then you have something that happens in the beginning that helps fix the problem, and then it starts to have a downward slide towards the end of the story. Had the perfect plot outline, has illustrations and dialogue. Grandma or Nokomis and Peter talk back and forth, and there's definitely illustrations. So it makes up all of those, and we can use any of those to help us write our answer. So it says, find 2 things from the story that could happen in real life. Write about how you know that the dream catcher is realistic fiction with at least 2 examples from the story, which means I need you to talk about how you know it's realistic fiction and prove that with the text. Okay. So if I have to prove that it is realistic fiction, that's going to be my first sentence. As you can tell, Mrs. Klingler said first sentence. That means it's not just a 1-sentence answer. All right, so over here, we're going to talk about, I know that the dream catcher is realistic fiction because it is a story that has a beginning, middle, and end. So there's one reason, right? It says that realistic fiction has a beginning, a middle, and end. The story also could really happen. For example, okay, what examples could really happen? So we just talked about several things that could really happen. A student really could have a presentation about their family, right? So if we look back on 39, we can learn how to spell presentation because, like I said, you have your book. There should be no reason why you're spelling words incorrectly. Go back to the story, find the words, find the part of the paragraph that talks about that. For example, students could really have presentations to give, right? We really could have presentations to give. What else in the story could have really happened? So dream catchers are real, and grandparents could really help you with your homework, right? So another example is, if you can see, Mrs. Klingler had a typo and it automatically fixed it, which is pretty cool about our thing. So if you see anything underlined or anything, like I said, we need to double check it. That a grandparent could really help you with your homework. Right? You could have a grandma help you with your homework. You could have a mom or dad help you with your homework. That is something that is truthful. And dream catchers are also real. There's lots and lots of examples that you could put here, but I need at least just 2. And then Mrs. Klingler actually gave 3 on the safe side. I talked about how there's a beginning, middle, end. That could be one of yours. And then another example from the text. But I went ahead and gave you some extra ones just to show you that there's tons and tons of examples. You need to talk about how you know it's realistic fiction first, though. and then give your examples, okay? So you really could have done this with one less sentence than what I did and still be completely correct, but you do have to state that you're proving that it's realistic fiction. That is answering the question completely and showing that you understood the question. That's why we restate things, is to show that I understand what it's asking me. And if you don't know how to restate, or if you don't understand what the question's asking you, that's when you need to raise your hand, guys, and say, I don't know how to answer this question, or I don't know what's asking me. Then we can help you and help you restate that part. But a good writer for questions understands the question before they start on the question. That way they have a full, complete answer. All right. Next part here, it says context clues, okay? If you come across a word you don't know, use context clues. Look at the other words in the same sentence. They can help you figure out the word's meaning. All right, so up here it says, use your book to help you answer questions about context clues. So talk about which words helped you figure out their meaning. Some of you were on the right track on this, and some of you, I think, kind of guessed and just plugged in an answer. So these are the words that we have to prove we understand what it means, and we have to look at these pages to figure that out. So we're going to have to look up page 40 to look up the word woven, and we're going to have to see where it's used in the sentence and then figure out what other words helped me understand it and what does that word mean. And sometimes it means what the other word is in that text. So what I need you to do is you're going to go back to page 40, because that's where woven is. Okay, so it looks like on page 40 we have paragraph 1, and I don't see it. Paragraph 2 right here, woven. I don't just read that word, okay? I read that whole paragraph that word is in, because context clues can be in the sentence that it is in, it can be in the sentence above it, and it can be in the sentence below it. So for you to fully understand what that word is, you need to completely reread that whole paragraph just to make sure you understand. So I'm not going to read the whole page. I'm just going to find the word that I'm looking at and just reread that paragraph. Peter opened the box. He spotted a wooden hoop inside. It was the shape of a circle. String was woven and twisted around the hoop. It looked like the spider web. A black bead set near the center of the feathers hung from the bottom. So now let's focus again just on the main sentence. String was woven and twisted around the hoop. So the picture can also help you. Look, string is woven and twisted around the hoop. Okay, so I can infer that woven also means twisted, which is kind of like, it looks like a spider web, right? They're talking about how it looks like a spider web and it's woven. So they're giving you lots of examples to help you understand what woven means. So let's go back to our question here, and it says, what is the meaning of woven? I'm going to say woven can also mean twisted. Okay, look at the thing again. It says here, woven and twisted. Remember our skills from last week and this week also are synonyms. Two words that mean the same thing are synonyms. So like happy and glad, woven and twisted. So we're still working on synonyms. These two words are synonyms. So we come back over here. And that's really all we need. That's based off of the context clues. The context clues, the clue that helped us understand that is actually the word twisted. Now let's look back at the word gazed, and that's on page 42. So I have to go back to gaze because there's going to be a word in there that's going to help me also. So we're going to have to go back to page 42. So 42, you can just turn to it in your book. All right, so page 42 is on this one. I'm going to skim the page, which means kind of glance at the page until I find the word gazed, and then I'm going to focus my attention to that area. So it looks like the word gazed is here in this paragraph here. So I'm going to just read this paragraph to fully understand. Nokomis and Peter worked together to make a dream catcher. That night, as he gazed and looked at the dream catcher over his bed, he made a plan. So now let's focus to just that sentence. That night, as he gazed and looked at the dream catcher over his bed, he made a plan. So we have gazed and he also looked. Looked is your context clue to help you understand what gazed means, because you could flip those words out. You could say, last night he looked at the dream catcher. Last night he gazed at the dream catcher. Last night he gazed and looked. They mean about the same thing. Gaze is just kind of looking kind of longingly, like you really are, it's really kind of a special thing, and you're just like, wow, I have this really cool thing. All right, so you're really looking at it intently, but it's definitely, you're looking at it. So we're going to come over here and we're going to go back to our assignment, and it says, and we're going to say gazed, whoops, if you do something like this and it changes, you can always do this backspace here and it will eventually change. The reason why I did that, see how it was highlighted blue? When I started typing, I didn't really pay attention to that, and it undid some things. This back button can help you fix issues like that. If things start to disappear or look different on your page than they originally did, they'll take you back to where you were before you accidentally messed it up. So gazed, so we're going to say gazed can also mean look at. Okay, so if you're gazing at something, it also means you can look at it, but this is still a complete sentence. And I think this is the end of it. So I want you to take your time now to go back through your assignment and utilize your book like Mrs. Klingler has just shown you. If you need to take parts of this video, it is going to be in your Google Classroom. You can go to the part that Mrs. Klingler is talking about and pause the video and look at my example and or rewatch that part, okay? Because part of learning is not just doing it first and then just getting done with it. Just like in our story Wolf, or even in Bruno's New Home, you need to practice. You need to continue to grow your skill by going back and looking at where your skill level is and improving upon it so that you can become a better reader and writer. And that's what reading class is for us to become better readers and writers. So in third grade, you're just going to have to go back to things a lot, but that's okay. That's how we learn. Learning is such a fantastic thing. It's like our bulletin board out in the hallway. It's like, I don't understand yet. You will understand. You will get good at this. It just takes practice. Just like I haven't mastered it yet. You will get this mastered, okay? But it takes time. So, and it also takes commitment to go back and make sure you are learning how to do it right, so that you can become excellent readers and writers. Okay, so the rest of this class time is, I want you to go back to your papers. I want you to re-edit and go ahead and fix the parts that you need to fix so that you all can have excellent answers too. Okay, thank you. Bye.